So as you work with standard units, it's really important for students to develop some familiarity with units. So you want to engage in activities where students get to compare a single unit of something. For example, maybe that is a centimeter, or maybe that is an inch. And then students should develop some personal reference, maybe a benchmark for them to understand, well, about how long is that thing? So I know that the tip of my index finger here is just about 1 inch long. It's not exactly 1 inch, but that's a good reference point. And then I know that my fingernail is just about 1 centimeter long. So if I'm thinking about how many centimeters in length is something, or how many inches in length is something, those are good reference points for me. I also know that here from my wrist to my elbow, that's just a little under a foot. So if I had to measure a foot, I've got a reference point here that I could use. What might be some of the reference points for your young students? I'd like you to think about that. So students should have some practice with identifying different standard units, and they should be able to locate objects in their environment that represent some of these standard units. So let's see, if I was looking around and trying to find something that was about 1 inch, well, I've got this clicker in front of me that you can see, and I see that the top part of this clicker, or even this yellow sticker on the back of this clicker, I would say that that's about 1 inch. If your students can look around their environment and find something that's about 1 inch, you know that they understand what 1 inch means. What if I was looking around my environment and trying to find something that was about 1 foot? Well, lucky for me, I have this hammer nearby. You know, you never know when you're going to need a hammer. And I did already measure this earlier, but I would say this is about 1 foot. It's definitely not about 1 inch, and it's definitely not about 1 yard, but it's probably about 1 foot in length. Thank you, hammer. You're coming in handy today. So those are going to be ways that students can think about identifying these standard units and having familiarity with what a single unit means versus what multiple units mean. And then as we think about selecting appropriate units, students should think about, well, if I'm measuring that hammer, do I want to measure that hammer in yards? That doesn't make that much sense. Do I want to measure it in centimeters? Sure, I could do that, but actually I think it would be best for me to measure that hammer in inches. So we have to think about how precise or how approximate we want our measure to be. And a big key here is efficiency. Students might say, I want to measure this in inches, or I want to measure this in feet, or I want to measure this in pounds or ounces, but is that always the most efficient way to measure something? Now, I think about this often with time. So I might think about the time it takes for us to have an entire school day. Well, should I measure that in seconds? Gosh, that would be a lot of it. Should I measure it in minutes? Ooh, that would also be a lot of minutes. Should I measure it in hours? Well, that's probably the most efficient way to see how much time we spend in school. So giving students scenarios and talking to them about these different units of measurement and which are more efficient is going to be an important thing. And so we always want to ask students to make a best guess, like would it be best to measure in seconds, minutes, or hours, and then confirm that with some discussion with the entire class. Now that brings us to a pause right here, and I would like you to consider this question. Which units, so we've been talking about quite a few of them, but which units are most important for your students to develop familiarity?